So I guess the main issue is that currently we don't have routing for taxonomies or contained content items.
There were two things we discussed. I'm just saying it out loud just to refresh my mind. There was the taxonomy routing, where we will be able to route an item inside a taxonomy, so a term, anything inside. Goal being able to list all the things that are associated to this term. And the issue being that, like back parts and anything that is contained in a content item can't be routed right now because auto-route doesn't work on sub-content items. So this is the first issue. And the second thing we looked at was dynamic routing, to be able to define as a content item or in a content item a patterned route like we will do statically in code, so that multiple URLs will match the same content item, and then the content item could use these route values to render something differently or do queries. So there were two different things, but we talked about them at the same time.
Yeah, that's a really good summary. So what I've done is more around taxonomies and contained parts, or items that are contained basically inside one content item as a bit of JSON. So it works for both bag parts and taxonomies, but it also kind of allows us at some point in the future to also provide a templated route as well, potentially. So if we were to look at, I haven't got a huge amount of time, so I'll use some content items that have actually already been created. So what I have here is a categories taxonomies, which has a bunch of separate routes, or a bunch of separate terms. And if I publish that, we can now go to view that. And on the front end of the site, actually get a nice URL of categories.
So that is already new, right? We can't do that today. What?
Correct, that's new. We don't have any display option at all for taxonomies currently.
So the view button, what happens if I click a view button on a taxonomy today?
I think I would have to check. I think you go to a URL.
A generic URL, because it doesn't have auto route, and it just displays maybe a display text categories. That's it.
I don't think it even has the display text, to be honest, but maybe it has
to. It has to.
Must have the display text.
Yeah. So.
Okay. But of course the footer.
And now you have containers/categories. Okay. How do you get that then? So no auto route. Did you add an auto route part on the?
So what I added was an entirely new part called a container route part.
Okay.
Because we talked about whether to merge it with auto route or whether not. And I figured the easiest way to go, at least to get something up and running, was to just make a new one that's very similar to auto route, but not quite the same, and see where we end up, whether it needs to be abstracted into two parts or whether it can actually go back into one. I think probably it works better as separate parts because there are different things about it. The behavior is different. So what you end up with is, when you actually look at the content item itself, some buttons down here which are very similar to auto route. In terms of being able to set the home page, set the permalink, so we can change this to categories 2 or something along those lines.
Just knee-jerk reaction here. If you say that they are very similar, you get 50% of the people will say it should be the same thing then. And then if there is some custom logic, then there might be some custom handler in the taxonomy to handle the custom logic for taxonomy on this part. And this way there is a single part. We'll see later, but
yeah, it comes down to how the indexes are handled. Personally, I think you probably could merge them together, But we try this way first to see what was needed.
Maybe the code might become more complex, but in terms of user experience, there will be less concepts to learn. We'll see. Let's see. Let's continue with your demo.
So what we also now have is the actual terms routing, which is the bit that we couldn't do previously. I should find one with some lists, with some stuff in it, shouldn't I? So I messed around with this. Does that have a taxonomy on it? No, it doesn't.
Can you create a new content item?
Yeah, let me just see what that term actually takes, or what content items have the field on it, because I messed around with this demo quite a lot. So I'll put it just in one for the moment. So we create the article, we put it in the taxonomy category. And then when we go to there, we actually have the articles that are associated with that taxonomy term.
If you display the taxonomy content item, what template is it using? Content-taxonomy?
No, it's using term. I made a new shape for it because I had to build a content driver and a whole bunch of stuff to actually make it render, because we don't have a display option for the term either.
That is a term, but for the previous window where it displays the hierarchy. This
Sorry,
page.
What was the question again?
What is the shape for this page?
The parent page here is the taxonomy display page, so it will be taxonomy.
Content-taxonomy?
As an override, it would be content-taxonomy. As an alternate, yes.
You mean you say override, but it can only be that then. There is no over. This is the root of everything.
Well, it's the taxonomy part is the name of the view.
Oh, there is taxonomy. I see. So you say, okay, you could change the taxonomy part itself. Okay.
So for an alternate, you would have your content type dash taxonomy part. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So when we go in here, we have just a generic list of items displayed in summary admin view, or in summary view. And then of course it builds automatically the links through to the content item itself.
Summary view.
That's what we've seen in Orchard 1 taxonomy view.
I have a flashback. A year ago, someone showed us something like this with the same theme, and it was also displaying taxonomies, but I think it was working on Orchard 1. And then I think we talked about having a custom display type for that, like when you display this content type as a taxonomy term, then use this summary. Like, that's a flashback. Oh my god, or déjà vu. We had a meeting last year about someone who did something like this. Okay. Looks good. Sorry.
That's right. This is all about kind of feedback on it. So some of the things that kind of has to happen because of this is if we were to look at the taxonomy itself, or the content type for the term.
So you made a container route part or something like this. Does it mean I can also use it with bags?
Yeah, it does mean you can use it with bags. If I just find the bagged item, you can use it with bags. I can make it work with localization, but it's more complicated with localization. Let's have a look example at this one, assuming this one works. Oh, I've taken the shape out of the picker, but so this content item has a bag part on it, two bag parts on it actually, with content items contained inside the bag part, and these now become routable as well. So on this main page, what you're seeing is the summary view for the contained content item, for the bagged item, and then you get the link through to the detail view.
So what is the item missing to have a nice URL? Is it an alias part?
No, what it's missing is a handle part.
Handle part, and we talked about it during the comment, I see.
Yeah, so what Sebastian's saying is, why does it have this? And the reason is because when you first add if we go back to the actual taxonomy itself, or the content definition for it, for example, so if you add a container root part to the taxonomy or the bag container, like the parent content item, then it has to have a way to build the URLs for everything that's contained in it, even if the URLs contained in it don't necessarily have a title part, or if the title is sometimes the same and duplicated. So initially you add a container root part, and then that will create a URL based on the contained content item, and if it has it, some display text. When you then want to get a pretty route for it, you go to the item that's kind of contained in it, and you add a root handler aspect or root handler part, which allows you to set what the pattern will be, whether it's just going to be based on display text, and I have a setting somewhere else which I'm not seeing here for whether or not the root should be rendered based on the parent's content item, so whether it should kind of go categories, travel, the next child, the next child, the next child, or whether it should be an absolute URL which is based off the pattern as you choose. So it's about options.
Okay.
One of the complicated things with having these items contained in each other is it's difficult to find the parent of them. So we don't have
you can't go up, yeah.
You can't go up. You can go down, but you can't go up. So most of this is based on being able to go down when the parent's published. So where that kind of going down becomes difficult is in a scenario with the content culture picker, which I pulled from the template, so you can't see it. Is if you're in say a bag list which has got maybe say 3 items in it for one culture, and then it's got 10 items in it for the other culture, you can't know which item you should be going to. when you're changing cultures.
Why?
Because of one may have 3 items and one may have 10 items.
But each item has a different handler.
It does, but if you want to change culture, it's difficult to match.
Oh, change culture, like switch from one culture to the other when you have a content item because there is no relationship between the two of them. Yes, there is no relationship, so you can't switch.
Yeah. So in that case, what I can actually do is we switch back to the parent item.
Yep. You can only,
culture, which I think makes sense.
You can just get the root containers localization.
Yeah.
That's the only concept that exists, and that's fine.
Yeah, I think so. I think it makes sense. It's the best option in that choice.
Worst case, we will need to have yet another part that could define, oh, I'm the localization of this other content item. You know, like
yeah,
it's
just, yeah.
But yeah.
But I think that's probably outside of scope at this stage. So the reason it works the reason it has a separate part is because of the need for that route handler part, and at some point it may also be useful to have an aspect handler, so that you can actually retrieve this content item here that's contained in something else via get content item ID by alias.
Yep.
Which is something we can't do at the moment either.
Correct.
So that's probably my biggest argument for making it a separate part, because they just do have different behaviors.
Yeah, you can always have a big part with lots of other services that you can re-implement in other features that will say, oh, the current content item is a taxonomy field, so let's do it differently. You know, like we do for themes. And just, I understand it's easier for coding, and I won't disagree with that. I mean, that's the easiest thing to do. But people will say, oh, I just want to have a nice URL and configure it. And so It should be the same everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, so that's one of the reasons that I did this separate.
So what happens if I put an auto route part and a container route part?
Is going to get confused. Because it will probably start routing twice, and the auto route part will win. Because we register the auto route entries first, because they're going to be the most common, so they're the most likely to win.
See, that's why we might be able to change the current auto route part to add a level of indirection about what thing to call.
So there's actually only one extra field in the index. Sorry, 2 extra fields: the contained item and the JSON path to it. So I see it as possible to bring this into auto route. Yeah,
and then and just have something like auto route part handler or selector, and then in the taxonomy module you will implement one that will say, oh, I take it because it's in taxonomy, in the container or whatever. So it's a container, so I can take it. So don't use a default logic, use my logic. You see what I mean? And in this way it will be just a single part. But there might be
the logic to find that item is based on an aspect. So it's a contained routing aspect, which just explains how to get to, because taxonomies are mostly stored in terms, bags are mostly stored in content items, in terms of properties, JSON properties. So it just asks for an aspect, which says, you know, if I'm a taxonomy, you're going to find some stuff in the terms array.
Yeah, and same thing for the route handler part. Maybe same thing, auto route part, and then because it's contained, then I have a different behavior again. Yeah, so that was probably one of the questions actually, because I can't show it on the demo because I didn't build the UI for it.
But when an item's contained like this, to me, it just makes sense that the roots are always, by level. But does that make sense for everybody else? Is there a time that you want the travel taxonomy to live at an absolute URL?
I see.
Nah. For me, by level is enough. It's not too difficult to do it both ways, but then you have to have another switch. You have to have a checkbox saying, should this URL be relative or should it be absolute?
Yep. I see. Yeah, maybe some people will want it to be absolute, and then you're like, ah. So is it just a part of the URL, or if it's just is it the full URL? I see.
Like I said, it's not hard to actually do. You just have to have another checkbox saying, should I be absolute or should I be relative?
Yep. And that will also be the case with lists, like we do for the blog post and the blog. That could work. That's a big refactoring of AutoRoute because it has to, yeah. If it's just in the container route logic, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, all I do is for the container route is I just make route providers.
If you see in the opposite way, like if container route is more complex than AutoRoute, now let's try to do the opposite. Let's imagine you just have a container route, and then if it doesn't have any content item, it will just work.
Correct.
See?
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of
yeah, it might as well just be AutoRoute in some ways.
Yeah, so in the end, we might say, okay, AutoRoute can handle everything. And not talking about taxonomy, but contained items, non-contained items, and then everything, and then that's it. And this way you have one part that does everything and can handle the most complex cases. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just the children path is empty.
Question about whether or not we could really make AutoRoute handle templating as well.
Well, you mean the dynamic routes?
Yeah, the dynamic.
No. This I think it should be different because this is a single route for. This is multiple. Yeah, no.
It's got to be different.
And the template itself is either generated or dynamic. So I think this one I will agree to have a different one. It's very custom specific. It's a very specific thing. It's like I have a content item that answers to many URLs, and it gives me parameters. So I'm like, it scares me. I'm not saying it's not possible, but then mixing everything, you have conflicts. Like, is it part of the URL or is it a pattern? We made some examples and we found we could not distinguish the different URLs. So later, but yeah. Well, that already looks super nice. I mean, that solves the main issue that people mention with taxonomy, and that's great. Now I have to check on theming and how people can customize that or not have that. I mean, they say, oh, I don't want to expose the endpoints for every term because I don't want people to list whatever is associated to terms or.
Actually, so one of the other options that I did add, which just isn't in this view at the moment either, is so your two options on the route handler part is my URL relative and should routing be enabled to this part, to this item.
Okay. Good.
So you can turn it off when you want to.
Good.
Because you can't expose everything. You don't want to expose all your items on your bag part. Maybe it's just a couple that you want.
Yep, good job. And then templating also would be a concern. That should work. Okay, awesome. Thanks a lot. So yeah, start the PR if you haven't published it yet, and for people to play with it and see how it goes.
It's a draft. We'll talk some more about whether or not it should be the same, whether it should be
route,
or container route.
Okay.
I don't mind either way. I think it can probably work as part of AutoRoute.
Yeah, because imagine you have auto route, alias part, route handler, container route. I mean, people will, I get it, but people will be super confused.
Exactly. And if you have this route handler part, then you also need an aspect handler part, and then some a localization aspect handler, and so many parts.
In that case, having a more complex code will make sense just to have a simpler list of concepts.
Cool. Let's do that.
Because people will be like, "What? I don't get it. Too complex for me. I just want a website." Yeah. So yeah, like implementation details, we should hide it. It will be a pain for us to maintain, but we should have good test coverage and functional test, and then to ensure we are not breaking anything when you change something. It will be a pain for devs, but not a pain for users. Okay, all good. Thanks a lot for that.
No trouble.